Jacob Collier has gone viral a lot on the internet, but not for any silly reason, but because he has a musical virtuosity that kind of transcends any era. Jacob Collier joined me to talk a little bit about his new album, the idea of restraint in making art, and how he says he broke his perfect pitch. How are you? Nice to see you.
Great to see you again. Yeah, all is well. I'm raring to get back to Canada for the first time in a while.
So very different on this record. The last time you and I talked, we talked about Djesse, which was, as I mentioned, like tens of thousands of voices and tons of collaboration. This is so different. This record, which is beautiful, by the way, is sparse. It's entirely made by yourself. My understanding is entirely made in like 4 days. Let's just start sort of sonically. Why did you want to make something a bit smaller, a bit more intimate after that?
So I've spent the majority of the last 8 years or so making this kind of sprawling collaborative record, Djesse, which we spoke about last time. And the thing with Djesse was it was sort of the most boundless form of collaboration I could think of. Not only with regard to humans and quantity of humans, but also genres and styles. And I traveled to every continent of the world and worked with musicians all across the land. And it was hard to imagine kind of outdoing it in terms of scale. And so I had these 4 days free before the last year's leg of my world tour began, and I wanted to set myself a challenge. So I picked an instrument. I picked one instrument. I picked the 5-string guitar, which is this instrument here. And this 5-string guitar is something I've long enjoyed to play. It's something that I kind of designed myself. The tuning I designed myself, and I wanted to try something that felt different, a little bit more limited by that sort of sonic identity. And I set myself a deadline of these 4 days, and I made this 11-song record that feels, in a sense, very different from Djesse because it's kind of coherent and specific in terms of the sound world, but it also feels, in a sense, like coming home, because the first record I made was called In My Room, and that was made completely here alone as well. That was more of a multi-instrumental record. I made that about 10 years ago now. But this felt like a rather gentle selection of songs and something I was quite proud to share in the end.
Can I ask you about the 5-string guitar, because it would have a lot of things like it would have a lot of history in British music. So you have, and we're going to talk about the tuning in a second, but like the dadgad tuning, D-A-D-G-A-D, was invented by this guy named Davy Graham, who was a British guitarist. So he sort of came up with the idea of a lot of these sort of a bigger open tuning like the one you play. Mm-hmm. Keith Richards plays a 5-string guitar.
Famously.
And the tenor guitar, which is a 4-string guitar, played a lot in British folk music. Are any of these your way into that 5-string guitar?
I'm very impressed by your knowledge of the ancestors of my 5-string guitar. Yes, the correct lineage is the tenor guitar, the 4-string guitar. I walked into a musical instrument shop aged 18 years old, I think I was 19, and I found this 4-string, and I totally fell head over heels in love with it. And first of all, I wanted to sound like Joni. That was my ultimate goal.
Mitchell.
Was to be able to, was to be able to play some of her kind of open tuning inspired music. And in doing so, recognized that in my dream scenario, there would be this additional 5th string, which would render the tuning fully symmetrical. So the way I tune my 5-string is D-A-E-A-D.
Can you play those notes in a row for me?
Yes, I can. Let's see. Just going to make sure that the audio settings are right. Can you hear this?
Yeah, I can hear it.
Yeah. There you go. So the strings are as follows. Right. And that means, to play a major chord, it's a very small adjustment from that. That's all it is, right? And you can bar those chords kind of easily, which is nice. But the cool thing, and this is niche and nerdy, but the cool thing is this string, this middle string, is a mirror. So everything you play on one side of the guitar, say you play this, you can play the same shape on the other side, and it has a kind of similar sonority. Right, so the relationships are the same. And that means that in terms of shapes, the shapes are almost completely different from anything you play on a usual 6-string guitar, somewhat similar to a tenor guitar, but because the tuning is half in fifths and half in fourths, it kind of means that you approach it a little bit like a mandolin, and then a little bit like an electric bass or like a normal guitar, and you end up with this sort of hybrid set of languages, I suppose.
So why 4 days? Why put that limitation on yourself?
I just had 4 days free.
Ah.
I was flying to Taiwan to kick the tour off in Taipei, and I only decided to make the record kind of with those 4 days remaining. And I thought, it'd be great to record. You know, sometimes you get a feeling like I need to record something. I need to throw some paint. And so I had this feeling. And I started to record, and after 24 hours, I realized actually maybe I could do it. It'll be ridiculous, but I'll try to do a whole record in these 4 days. And in the end, I ended up recording these 11 songs, and I put the sequence together on the plane to Taiwan, and that was what got released.
What's the best and the hardest? So 2 answers. What's the best and the hardest thing that comes with trying to make a record on one instrument in 4 days?
In a sense, I think the hardest thing is the best thing, and it's that limitation. Well, those 2 limitations. You know, I have the kind of the experience a lot when I make music of there being so many options. You know, there's constantly this array, like a kaleidoscope of avenues down which I could travel, or you know, take my whatever takes my fancy, I can go down there. I really kind of revere when I have what I think of as a container, like a container for my ideas. So I think that what made the record coherent and what made it enjoyable for me, I think at its most was those the limitations of the time and the instrument. It rendered, you know, you can say you can render infinity out of a bunch of different types of things. You can get infinity out of infinity by saying there are unlimited options, and you can render infinity in that way, as I've done before. But you can also get a different like flavor of infinity out of finity, you could say, or like a smaller group of options. You know, this instrument is not infinite. You can't do that much on it besides the things that are within its limits. You know, it's like it's one physical guitar.
You don't have space between the semitones. You don't have a lot of room other than bending. You don't have a lot of opportunity. Yeah, there's only so much you can do with it.
Yeah, like it's not a drum, and it's not a bass, and it's not a piano. But I really enjoy, in general, trying to play instruments in ways that instrument isn't usually thought to be played. So a lot of the guitar playing on this record is, you know, some of it is guitar inspired, but there are moments where it's a bit more inspired by things like a harp or things like a piano or even like an orchestra. And occasionally I use it sort of, you know, reversing it using different sound effects. And I think the results are interesting. It's sort of unlike anything I've made before because of those limitations, I think.
I have a question lyrically. Sam, can we play that Tom Thumb song?
Tom Thumb, where do you come from? I'm lost, soft, drowning in everything. Tom Thumb, thought you were gone and I found you.
That is Jacob Collier and Tom Thumb from his album The Light for Days. I have a question about that song, and just tell me if I'm on to something. The early days of you making music was all in your room by yourself, and no one really knew about you. You were putting together songs almost for school projects. You were putting together songs and learning sort of like rudimentary Final Cut, how to make. You play a million instruments at the same time. Famously, we talked about this last time. You put those songs up online. Quincy Jones reaches out to you. You have sort of like this worldwide fame. Tom Thumb is a figure in British folklore of a young boy who goes out and slays giants and has all kinds of adventures and changes the world, but is, you know, a small little boy the size of a thumb. When you are making a record that's going back to some of your like early ways of making music before you started doing a lot of different collaborations and before things got huge for you, Jacob, are you sort of singing about yourself there? I mean, the line was Tom Thumb, I found you. I found you again. Like, are you sort of singing about your own self there?
That's a really beautiful question. Probably one of my favorite questions I've been asked about the whole record so far. And yes, it was written about you. No, the experience of that song, I often find myself drawing from my youngest days. I think it's a really beautiful place to find inspiration as an artist because they're so vivid. Like when you're small, life is so vivid and everything is brightly colored and it's like the saturation of the world is turned up. I think children are like the wisest people. And I think I was at some of my wisest when I was really young. I just feel like it's one of these things I hold dear as a belief about human beings. So I liked the idea of kind of honoring this little character, Tom Thumb, who is kind of infinite. But I enjoyed the idea that, you know, you set out as a child to go on this adventure, right? And that's how it felt when I was small. I thought, well, I don't know where I'm going to end up in this music thing, but I'm gonna share things that I care about and things that I've made by hand and things that are unconventional and strange and things like that. And I like the idea that, you know, you as a musician, you're constantly seeking like the new a new thread to pull on, something that feels authentically you, that comes from the sort of cloth of the tapestry of your life. But actually the answer to the question you're asking shows up in unexpected ways and in unexpected people and places. So the idea of Tom Thumb, I found you inside of everything. You know, Tom Thumb, where do you come from? I'm lost, soft, drowning in everything. Tom Thumb, thought you were gone, but I found you inside of everything. That's the lyric. And I think an experience I have had a lot and had as a child and I've had a lot as a grown-up, I think more as a grown-up than as a child, is of kind of almost drowning, a bit like what we were just talking about, almost drowning within the number of potential roads, options, places that are pulling me in different directions. I think all of us as people probably feel this to a point right now in this moment in time where we're being pulled in different directions. But sometimes when you squint your eyes or when you're least expecting it, you find this almost like a little fairy, like an answer to your biggest questions comes in a small form and comes in unexpected ways.
Sonically, the record was surprising to me at times because, again, I was introduced to you through gigantic, huge chord versions of reharmonized Beatles songs and Stevie Wonder songs. And I don't know if you can tell from my weird, nerdy question earlier, but like folk music, especially actually British folk music, means a lot to me. And there were moments when I was listening to this record before I got to the song we're about to play where I said, oh, this is sort of reminding me of like a mid-'60s, late 60s British, you know, Bert Jansch, you know, Nick Drake, acoustic guitar record. And then I heard this song. Sam, can you play this?
If you want to catch a star, then walk my way. I will take you where the night is always day. You can follow me if you really try. Maybe we will find the rainbow and teach it to fly.
That's Fairy Tale Lullaby off of Jacob Collier's new album. That's a song originally by the British folk singer and guitarist John Martin. I think your audience is probably very familiar with the Beach Boys and with the Beatles and Stevie Wonder and Herbie Hancock. My guess, maybe not as much John Martin. Were you listening to a lot of that music growing up?
I really was. John Martin was a huge, huge hero of mine, as I imagine he was for you. The record London Conversation, from which this song was taken, it changed my life as a 17, 18-year-old and was partly what inspired the original love for the tenor guitar, was wanting to have a guitar that felt like it lived in that scene, like it lived in the middle of the 60s in the UK. And I wanted to sound like, I wanted to sound like John.
How did that record come to you? Where did you hear it?
It's a great question. I don't know. I know that at that time I was kind of discovering Joni Mitchell and I was discovering Bob Dylan and Bert Jansch, who you mentioned, I also stumbled across. And I think one thing kind of led to another and I ended up with this kind of treasure in my hand, which was this John Martin record. And I responded to it with such enthusiasm. And it's not just the guitar playing, which is pretty masterful. It's also just the way he's singing it. It's hard to. It's funny to say, but it's almost like there's a deep Britishness to it. It feels conversational. It feels warm. It feels a little almost like detached in a way. Like it's quite whimsical. And I don't know. It really hit me, and I've always loved the song.
Can I say that it sounds British and that it's very restrained music? And with all love to you, that's not a label I would have put on your music before this. I mean,
yes.
You were sort of known for as many instruments as you can get on at sometimes, and also just like reharmonizing popular songs and making them sound different, which I'm trying to explain to people who are listening to this, like taking a song like Hey Jude, which would have a certain chords in it, and then you playing different chords that would correspond with the note you were singing, but they would be different, perhaps more interesting chords. Did you have to hold yourself back a little bit to make this record?
It's a great question, an interesting question. In a way, I would say that I was naturally held back by the means, like the guitar and the time limitations, so much so that I didn't feel the need to like pull back further than my intuition. A song like Fairy Tale Lullaby, like it's it's not the kind of song that I'm inclined to destroy harmonically. You know, like there have been songs in the past that I felt inclined to destroy. One being the Flintstones theme tune, which I was on in my room. I harmonized the Flintstones, and it barely survived.
Destroy is such a great word, Jacob, for that.
Well, thank you. You know, I think there are times and places for like being really harmonically kind of irresponsible, and I've always really been tickled by that and loved it. But I think that the reason, even back then, even with the Flintstones, like the harmonic decisions I make kind of come from just from my personality, like what I care about and what I'm feeling. And I think the reverence I have for a song like Fairytale Lullaby didn't inspire me to break the song very much. There are a couple of sort of slightly more colourful moments that I colour in here and there, but the song it's kind of a perfect song, and I didn't want to change it too much.
I mean, since the last time we talked, the experience of getting the audience to sing has only gotten bigger, and especially bigger online, and more people are showing up to the shows. This came across my feed from one of your shows last year. I thought it was a beautiful moment. Can we play this? Can you tell us what we're hearing there, by the way?
Yeah, so that's a Korean song called Arirang, which coincidentally is the same name as the new BTS record, but I was first. And one of the things that I really loved to do last year was to learn a song from every city that I played in, or from every country that I played in, and to have this moment in the show where I would begin singing the song, playing the song, and then the audience would kind of rally and join together. And it was really moving. Like in general, it was such a.
What I was struck by was when you sang that song, the audience in Korea or in South Korea, really there was a gasp at the beginning, like and a real warmth. Like, what do you remember feeling on stage in that moment?
I remember feeling that warmth. I think you'll bang on. I think there's a, I would never kind of announce it beforehand. I would always just kind of sneak in the song. Like I think I was playing a different song, and then I would end up in the key of the song and sort of go, okay, let's start here, and the results were often of kind of this warm surprise. But I think of it as a duty of mine. I'm so lucky to travel the world, and play these concerts, and I love a challenge, as you know. I feel like you know me well enough to know that I love a challenge. So to me, it was kind of a no-brainer of, well, I'll try and learn these songs that, are new for me and very familiar for the audience, and try and find a place to put the song that gives the audience that feeling of warmth, and that I'm honoring their culture, because I really love that that moment in the set where they feel like I've met them where they are. They haven't just come to meet me where I am. I meet them where they are too. And so Arirang was one of, I think it was probably about 40 songs or so that I learned across the year, across all these different walks of life, across South America, across Asia, Europe, and the US and India. Last year was a really kind of global touring year. So yeah, I learned all these amazing songs, and every time you learn a new song, you kind of learn a little bit more language. But the thing I treasure the most, I think, is just that it's the moment of connection, and you can see it in their faces and their eyes. There's this sense of kind of being met that I really value a lot.
If you want to announce your BTS collaboration here, you can go right ahead, by the way. If you
okay,
want to,
I'll go right ahead. Yeah.
if you want to make the news that your next record's with BTS, buddy, go right ahead.
Yeah,
I'm here for you. I want to play you a little bit of. I want to talk a little bit about your improvisation with orchestras. You had a couple of videos get pretty big numbers around that. Improvising with an orchestra live on stage. So we're going to play the clip in just a second. But before we play the clip, my understanding is the idea to improvise with an orchestra is an idea that came from a challenge from the musician Ben Folds. Is that right?
Absolutely correct. Again, a challenge that someone set me that I really enjoyed. Ben gave me about, I don't know, maybe 12 hours or so to prepare for that. Like he mentioned it to me the day before the concert.
He said what? I want you to get up on stage and.
He said, I think you should do something with the orchestra that you haven't rehearsed. That there's no plan for. There's no sheet music. There's no conversation. You should just go and do something. And I'd seen him do it before. I'd seen him do this online, and there are these videos of Ben. Kind of it's an amazing thing. He'll improvise a song on the spot, and the orchestra will do loops and things like that. And so it's a form that I've known, and he's great at. And so when he challenged me to do this, I thought, okay, I want to do something slightly different. And I tried this thing out where I kind of built in my brain like a picture of the orchestra, the music, and I kind of had a sense of what different departments of the orchestra were going to do. Like, okay, the woodwinds can do this section, the strings maybe can do the sustained note in the verses, and the brass could do the chorus, and we could do a snare drum and a cymbal, and maybe the marimba can join in for this, and a vibraphone and the harp. Like, I had a sense of the thing before. If you saw me like right before I went on stage, I had this like an A3 piece of paper on the floor, and I was mapping out the whole thing. But it was a really, really fun challenge, and the results were surprising to me, because it was sort of more emotional than I was expecting. I thought maybe I'd get to the end of the piece and the orchestra would kind of be going, and it would be fun. But when I was on the stage, I kind of had this spontaneous thought that I should get the audience to sing a part of the song, because I set up this song that they knew, and the orchestra was going, and then I kind of gestured to the audience, and then the audience sang the song, and so I felt like this lightning rod between orchestra and audience, where I was able to kind of get them to speak to each other, and they're facing each other. The orchestra is facing the audience, and the audience is facing the orchestra, and they're all facing me. So I felt like this energy in the center of the room, which was, again, like a really special experience, and I kind of caught the bug. It was a really beautiful thing, and from that moment forwards, almost every time I've played with an orchestra, which I sometimes get the pleasure of doing, I will always try and improvise something that I have no plan for.
So that D should go down to a C on the second bar. So it's like, ba, ba. Does that make sense? And the B flat should go down to an A, but
Go on, trumpets.
only every other time. Yeah? So it's like, and then, does that make sense? You're the best. Okay. Let's do horns, trumpets, and all the brass. Trombones, bass trombone, tuba. 2, 3, go. I mean, that feels good to me. Feels good to me.
Is there any part of you in those moments that's like, oh my God, I hope this goes okay?
Yeah. Yes. I enter a kind of flow state, I suppose, where it kind of just has to work. Like it must succeed. And for that reason, and that's not to say it always does, because sometimes I'll try something and it's like, oh no, that wasn't good. Okay, let's try something else. Funnily enough, when that happens, the audience really loves it. Like they love seeing something fail and then tweaked and then succeed, because they get to follow the journey of it kind of getting better. And whilst I do have a picture of who's doing what in the orchestra at what time, I'm also kind of improvising and adapting as I go. So the clip you just saw was a section in the song where the brass were building this kind of chorus chords up. So I'd given each individual instrument a note. I said, okay, tubas, you play E flat, and bass trombone B flat, and actually I'd originally given the bass trombone a B flat that was too low, and it was too low. So I said, actually, that's too low. Let's just cut off the octave, and so then it was better. So
your pitch is great too. Like you're singing these notes. I didn't know your pitch was so good. Like you're singing these notes that you're asking them to play.
Oh, thanks very much, Tom. I find it helpful to speak it, like to say what I want to hear, even if it's a drum, and it's kind of hard to sing a drum part. But I always try to articulate exactly what I mean when I say play a B flat. Because if I say just play a B flat, then the trumpet might go bop, bop, or So if I go like that, then it's like that's the kind of B flat that I mean when I say B flat. I try and be as physical as I can to show how long the notes are and whatever, just so it's clear, because they don't have any music, so they're relying completely on my kind of onomatopoeic descriptions and then like physical representation of the instructions.
What was that a B flat just then?
It was.
Okay, so I didn't know. Oh, you have perfect pitch. I didn't know you have. Yeah, which can be.
I do, and
it can be a challenge. It can be a challenge.
It can be a blessing and a curse. But for this particular example, I would count it as a blessing, because I'm able to pull a note out and then give it to a particular person, and I can give it to them with my voice.
But what about when you're traveling the world and you're playing musics that aren't on the 12-tone scale? Like, what about when you're playing musics that are a little bit? I'm getting really nerdy now, but like when you're playing music that the note that is played in the scale is not 12 notes. The scale is, or 12 tones. Yeah. There's a lot of different opportunities, microtones in between. So what would sound to me like a flat I'm trying to take everybody along here. What would sound to me like a flat E flat, like an out of tune E flat, is actually the note that is meant to be played in that culture.
Is in fact correct.
Does that
in
mess with your perfect
culture.
pitch?
Well, I've been so obsessed with microtonal music for probably about 10 years, 12 years now. So much so that I almost broke my perfect pitch with it, actually, because, I was almost deliberate. Like, I started to write songs in keys that weren't on the piano and weren't on the guitar. And, one of the luxuries of being a singer is that you can live wherever you want to live. You don't have to live in a 12-note equal tempered 440 tuning system. So I really enjoyed, originally I just started to move the compass around and write songs in like G half sharp or E half flat and things like this. I especially enjoyed starting a song in a real key and then modulating to a key that doesn't exist, because there's this crazy kind of emotional like liberation that happens sonically where you sort of feel like you've entered like a new glade, like a new land, and it's hard to explain why, but I think it's because there is no reference point. Like, your brain has no memory, no cultural baggage, nothing. You've never experienced the key of G half sharp, unless it was accidental, which sometimes it is, until this moment. So it's so fun to get to move keys to those places. And I have very much enjoyed working with musicians. Like, I think about like Anushka Shankar, Varajeshri Venugopal, Hamid Al-Kasri, Umar Sangari, like musicians from India, Africa, where a lot of the way that the notes behave, like they bend and they move and change, like it's not how we were trained. Like for me, like as an English lad, like I didn't know it was possible to bend in a particular way or to give a particular type of nuance until I hear it or until I'm shown. So I've become a bit of an enthusiast, but somewhat at the expense of my precision. Like, I actually think 10 years ago my perfect pitch was sharper than it is now, because I've gone so much off the beaten path of A440. Sometimes it's hard to tell exactly what 440 is nowadays.
That's so fascinating. The last question on the orchestra thing is, I guess what does it give you in terms of the connection with the musicians you have on that stage in that moment? I mean, we're talking a lot about the dichotomy of collaboration versus being by yourself in the room. Your mother is and was a great orchestral conductor as well. I mean, talk to me a little bit about the connection you feel with these musicians. You're walking in, probably haven't met half of them, and making this with them.
It's funny, when I originally did this at the Ben Folds, I think it was at the Kennedy Center with the NSO. The musicians, they were pretty suspicious of me. I step up there in my pajamas and I say, right, we're going to do this thing, and you have no idea what's going to happen. And I can't say they were that enthusiastic. So part of the joy actually for me is sort of de-stuffifying a stuffy scenario. And this is something that I've just enjoyed over the last 10 years in different ways. Some audiences and some orchestras and some choirs are just full of beans. They're so full of enthusiasm and energy, and they're fearless. They're going to go with you. Some are not. And actually, a lot of people in the classical world, because of the way that the training happens in classical music, which is so often so regimented and so kind of liturgical and rigid, these musicians aren't necessarily comfortable jumping off the plan and improvising, doing something that's brand new. So a lot of my kind of task in that situation is to make them comfortable, to really say, hey, you're safe here. Like, it's okay. I'm not going to judge you if you do it wrong, and we can do this together. And I think that the audience, like, there's a sort of triangle. There's the orchestra to me, and then there's me to the orchestra, but then there's also the orchestra to the audience and back again, and there's me to the audience and back again. So my job in that situation is to kind of be a shepherd of energy and experience and permissioning in all these different directions in a way that makes sense. But it's mostly a social thing, actually, for me. Like, it's more social than musical, because musically I can riff and I can give people notes, but the real task is giving people the notes and kind of generating a musical scenario that feels satisfying in a human sense, because I think that there's something contagious about being non-rigid, actually. It's like being wiggly, you could say. And I think as a conductor, a wiggly conductor of the orchestra, if I can de-rigidify their plan, I think kind of everyone wins from that. I hope that everyone wins from that, because we live in a world full of rigid straight lines, and music is one of the nicest ways of relaxing those lines, and it really is a joy when it works.
It is a joy to watch you continue to evolve musically and to listen to your music along the way. But before we go, I have a simple closing question. Dead or alive, someone you would like to collaborate with, would have liked to collaborate with, that you haven't collaborated with yet? Who is it?
Dead or alive? Gosh, that's quite an infinite question. The first name that popped into my head was when you said it was Jimi Hendrix.
Really?
Who I felt we got to know so little of in his very brief but very prolific kind of period of time where he was working. Obviously, I've had a bit of a guitar phase recently.
Yeah, but truly, even I said to someone about Jimi Hendrix the other day, as good as he is talked about, and he is talked about as the greatest of all time, we're actually kind of still not there in terms of how good he was. Like he's better than how people talk about him. You know,
he's better than how people talked about him. His influences were feel to me as unspeakably broad, and his kind of showmanship was just on another level. But I think the reason I bring him up in terms of a collaboration is just because I would have loved to tap into the kind of operating system that was running behind the virtuosity and behind the showmanship and behind the songs, because my sense is if we'd got another even 2-3 years, let alone 20, 30, 50 of his writing, I think there was just this enormity to his musicianship that we can only really guess at. And I'm so grateful that we got what we got from him. And in a sense, there is nothing to be desired because it leaves so much up to the imagination. But man, I would have liked to have sat with Jimmy and kind of, hashed out some music and got a sense of the kinds of things that really get him excited,
I mean, maybe AI can do it for us, Jake. I'm only joking.
Yikes. Yeah.
Again, I'll say that it's been a joy to watch your evolution as a musician, from record to record to record. And thanks so much for making the time for us today. I appreciate that.
It's an absolute pleasure. Always good to see you, Tom.